last couple of years, there has been a discussion about adaptation of the North Atlantic Treaty Organization to new security environment. If we look back last 10 years, we can state that this adaptation process was successful. Any adaptation process needs kind of clear guidance, needs to know to what circumstances an organization should adapt. So that means this guidance for an adaptation is given by, I guess, in this case, three major fait accompli. The first one was the Russian attack on Georgia in 2008 and subsequent robust reform of the Russian armed forces. Another fait accompli was military contingency on eastern Ukraine and the annexation of Crimea in 2014. And last but not least, the driving force for continuation of adaptation of NATO was the full-scale invasion of Russia to Ukraine. If we look back and take a stock of this adaptation process during the last 10 years, we can clearly see certain trajectory, which means that NATO is being prepared gradually for facing near-peer adversary in high-intensity scenario. In other words, NATO was preparing last 10 years for a conventional war. If we look at the summit in Wales 2014 that brought Readiness action plan that meant change in thinking about alliance, deterrence and defense posture, and also brought about some assurance measures for NATO, Central and Eastern European countries, plus the so-called defense pledge. That means that all allies should invest at least 2% of the GDP to defense. It was the start of the process. Then we had a NATO Warsaw summit in 2016 that was kind of another milestone in changing deterrence and defense posture of NATO, reflecting the Russian annexation of Crimea, and brought so-called enhanced forward presence, which means enhanced forward presence in a form of NATO battalions in Lithuania, Latvia, Estonia and Poland, and also kind of a tailored forward presence in the Black Sea region, mainly in Romania. Then NATO continued with its adaptation process for facing near-peer adversary in high-intensity scenario, and its 2018 Brussels summit brought so-called NATO Readiness initiatives. The NATO Readiness initiative was about increase of alliance rapid response capability, both in high-intensity warfighting, but also for increasing rapid military crisis response of the alliance. So this is what was called 4x30. That means NATO should have 30 heavy or medium maneuver battalions, 30 kinetic squadrons, and 30 naval combatants ready within 30 days. This process, before the launching of the Russian invasion to Ukraine, was finished by substantial change of NATO defense and deterrence posture on strategic level. So 2020, Alliance approved a concept for deterrence and defense in Euro-Atlantic area. This change of its deterrence and defense posture meant basically that NATO would enhance its advanced planning for potential crisis and conflict scenario. Then 2022, we have a full-fledged invasion of Russia to Ukraine, and the first reaction was that NATO decided that it will bring also enhanced forward presence to Bulgaria, Hungary, Romania, and Slovakia. So apart from the battalions in Baltic states and Poland, we have now 4 in other countries. So together, NATO battalions, enhanced forward presence in 8 countries. Then the summit in Madrid 2022 decided about increase of NATO presence on the eastern flank, which means that the battalion-sized groupings should be scaled up to brigades. There should be brigades in the eastern flank instead of battalions. And NATO also adopted this new force model, NATO new force model, which strengthens and modernizes the NATO force structure. The last major decision was made in Vilnius summit, NATO 23, when NATO leaders approved the most comprehensive and detailed defense plans since the Cold War. So this new generation of this defense plans, these plans direct how NATO will deter and defend against any aggressor from any direction, and also how, in the event of crisis, allied forces would defend forward and defeat complex of threats across NATO. So, in other words, it says specifically what will be expected from respective allies in the time of crisis. We are now in the phase of adaptation, of, let's say, implementation of this strategic and doctrinal changes. In order to ensure effectiveness of these plans, allies are implementing the new force model, NATO force model, which delivers a larger pool of dedicated forces. And also the leaders approved the intent to reform and strengthen command and control structure. and also to increase or bring a greater logistic coordination and a prepositioning of ammunition and equipment, which is very important. So I made a summary in order to see that nowadays NATO, after this 10 years adaptation process, is prepared for, let's say, conventional war, is being prepared gradually for facing near-peer adversary in conventional war, high-intensity scenario. But what is the situation now? Now the situation is that the West has practically one near-peer adversary, which is China. And another opponent, Russia, is gradually losing the position of near-peer adversary. Russia still will be an dangerous opponent and adversary, probably, but in the military and economic terms, not really near-peer adversary. This does not mean that we should not be prepared for conventional war, but a question is whether in the reality we will see in the near future, let's say next 10, 15 years, any high intensity scenario, any conventional war. It is my belief that it will not be the case. I do not think that next 10, 15 years we will have another conventional war in Europe or in the Pacific. As I said, we need to be prepared for such a scenario, but for sure we need to be prepared for continuation of great powers competition. Great powers, I mean the West, represented by NATO, United States, China, Russia, let's see, Iran or North Korea. But the thing is that in my understanding, what we see now, I think we need to have a good stock taking after this war. But what seems to me plausible scenario is repetition of irregular warfighting as a tool of big powers competition. This is actually something that we know from the Cold War. And we are now speaking about the Cold War number 2, which means, in my understanding, that probably the irregular warfighting, internal conflicts, civilian wars will be repeated with the involvement of the major powers. So if you look at the final stage of the Cold War from 1975 to 1990, the majority of conflicts with involvement of two superpowers, United States, Soviet Union, and also involvement of China, majority of them were irregular warfighting, internal conflicts, civilian wars. And for this, we need to have different kind of forces, capabilities, and skills. So certainly NATO needs to be prepared to send heavy armored brigades to some contingency, or the United States plus NATO allies should be prepared for major naval battle with China. But more likely is that we will be involved in, let's say, internal conflicts, fighting in third countries. For this, you rather need special operations teams. You need to ability to conduct very precise drone strikes. You need to have some security force assistance for training your partners. You need to develop professionals running different projects in remote areas and regions. And last not least, you need to have a train diplomats, intelligence officers that are mastering the languages, for instance, in Africa. Because if you look the reality in Africa, what the West is now facing, that we are rather on the losing side in competition with Russia. I think that the reality in Africa is that one country after another experience some coup d'etat, often prepared by civilian government, inability to control local jihadist movements. And Russians were prepared to provide military and security assistance to this new government that were brought by coup d'etat. So the West was effectively beaten by Russians in Mali, Central African Republic, Burkina Faso, and now Niger, which is a really major issue. So what I'm saying is that NATO now is in a shape that it is well prepared, and after the implementation will be even better prepared for conventional war with near-peer adversary. But in the reality, we will face different kind of conflicts. Apart from irregular fighting, kinetic fighting, what I mentioned, we can face different kind of coercive actions. For instance, vis-à-vis Taiwan, not full-fledged invasion, but rather some blockade. We can face some naval blockade, air blockade, different kind of contingencies, and we should to be prepared for it. It seems to me now that the last edition of United States defense and security strategy is too much focused on conventional war, and we need to change that. We need to broaden our abilities, our ability to rapid deployment in remote areas, rather very skilled combat teams, but we probably need to invest also in diplomats, in and intelligence officers that are familiar with those areas like Africa, the Middle East, and that master languages. So to sum up, I think, and what is my main thesis is that I see a merit and clear sense in preparation for conventional war, taking into account our experiences with Russia. But I think that the world and security environment will be really different after the war. We need to have a thorough stock taking. We need to have a more civilian military threat assessment, and we need to focus on different domains of continuation of great powers competition, rather than too much concentrate on conventional war, because every war is a tragedy, but after the war it brings a period of peace, and during the peace we need to prepare for changed world, changed warfare, and also change strategic thinking of us and also of our adversaries.